This is our first hybrid, in-person, and virtual meeting since before the start of the COVID pandemic. Thank you for being part of this, whether you are joining in virtually tonight or if you're here with us in person tonight. Thank you so much for being part of this and for being here for this first hybrid meeting for a community conversation with Mayor Curtatone.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. Well, everyone, good evening. My name is Byron Barnett. It's an honor for me to be here with this event with your longtime outgoing mayor, Joe Curtatone. We're going to have a little conversation tonight, and maybe it'll be a little two-way. If you have any questions out there, I'll try to goad a few of you into asking a few questions or just making a comment or whatever. But first of all, just a brief reminder of who I'm sitting with right now. Mayor Joe Curtatone, as most of you know, was first elected in 2003 and is currently serving his ninth term as mayor. And that's what, 18 years? That's almost 2 decades. That is really amazing. Before that, he was a city councilor for 8 years here in the city of Somerville. This is his hometown, born and raised here, grew up in a vibrant immigrant community, and went to public school here that gave him the tools to succeed in college and in law school, and eventually leading him to a life of public service to ensure that others will have the same opportunities that he had access to himself. That is your mayor. First of all, Mayor, I guess the one thing I wanted to start off with is really after all these years serving the great people of Somerville for 18 years, that's a long time. How are you feeling about ending this part of your career? I mean, it must be a little emotional.
Yeah, it is. I'm sad, but as I mentioned to you and many others, I was happy. I meant to have stayed too long, but first, it's great to see so many of you here. I thought we'd get a couple people because I remember these crowds at 150, 200. It's going to take some time to get back to, but I know so many are tuning in virtually and at home, and thanks for coming out, and thanks for all of you that you've done to help to keep the city safe and take on the pandemic. So many people's lives have benefited from it. Thank you very much. Yeah, hey, best job I ever had. What a privilege and honor. I've probably been here 10 years longer than I promised my wife I would do the job. And you come to a decision like this, and I've always been advised, you don't leave when you want to leave. That means you stay too long. You don't want to be happy about leaving. So I'm sad for the right reasons, but I'm in a great place about it, and the city's in a great place, and I'm loving it. It's busy and stressful right now, but I've loved every day of it, and I'm going to enjoy every day through my final day of January 3rd.
Well, that's great. Well, let's dive into it here. We just want to get some of your thoughts on some issues and things that we're not going to be able to hear from you very much longer as mayor, although I'm sure we'll be hearing from you on other things. Let's talk about the pandemic. You mentioned it right off the top, and that's kind of the top of everyone's mind today. It's affected every aspect of life, not only here in Somerville, but also around the world. Can you give us an update on the status of the city's response to COVID?
Sure. Again, thank you all, the entire community. Whether you live here, you work here, you have a business here, for really standing by side. It was that, it really kept me going personally, being isolated. And I'm an extrovert, for those who know me in my office, and actually seeing some of my staff for the first time in months in person, and not seeing the bustling activity of all of you, many of you, especially you, Ron, in City Hall, and your activism. It was hearing the stories from all of you, helping out, giving out food, delivering groceries, checking in on your neighbors, getting the word out about the importance of being vaccinated and wearing masks. It's hard to say where we succeeded because we lost, as of today, 96 souls in our community. We've had some businesses shutter. You had far fewer than anyone else. And I don't know how you judge success, but I am proud of the people that serve this community, the sort of dedication and passion, talent, skill, jumping outside their comfort zone to do everything to work on food service, on health response plans. I know our health director, Doug Kress, is here from the head of HHS, one of the unsung heroes in this Commonwealth, as we worked with other coalitions and cities and regions on a regional response. So today, yes, we've lost 96 souls, and we pray we don't get any more calls, because every time a person died in Somerville, as they do always in COVID, I got those calls from Doug, and those strike you at the core. You ask yourself, did I do enough? Today, we're happy that almost 80% of our whole population is fully vaccinated. The majority of over 80%, 85 and higher. There are a couple of groups in the younger ages.
That's amazing.
Yeah, younger ages that aren't there, but we think they're actually there. It's just how it gets reported. But we got a ways to go. It's that last sort of segment, that last mile. We got to, we have tools today, Byron, that we didn't have a year ago. We know a lot more. So it's really been the response of not just incident command team in the system here in the city or health department, but the community. Any message, the right message, an accurate message about the importance of keep each other safe, that selfless value set we aspire to emulate every day, and getting vaccinated, the community's led that charge, so we are grateful for it, and people's lives have been saved. It's hard to determine how many people did we save, but we know what we lost. So every day we remind ourselves, do not forsake. Well, we can't even measure what we lost, do not forsake those souls. It's not about even loss of convenience, but it's that human impact. And so we're in a much better place today. Economically, I'll tell you, we've already recaptured the wins at our economic sales and our engine moving forward. But now we have an opportunity really to look at how we feel as a society, have felt, which was made glaringly obvious in the pandemic, how the systems failed everyone, who works, where you work, how you get around, who has health coverage, who has worse projected health outcomes compared to others. Now we are in a position to take an opportunity to continue to be that standard bearer as a community.
Okay. Now I'm going to follow up on this, but I also want to invite, after I ask him this question, we get a response. If anybody has a question, I think we've got a microphone we might be able to bring to someone about questions they have about the future of the city's response to the pandemic. We're going to have a new mayor coming in. What I was going to ask you about, Mayor, was throughout this whole saga we've had here, this crisis, this health crisis with the pandemic, you have taken a much more conservative approach here in Somerville than the state government has. Could you talk about your thinking behind that, your reasoning, why you felt you had to be more cautious than really a lot of the other communities and really what the state was taking? I mean, in the newsroom we'd say the state's going one way, there goes Somerville being much more conservative, and we're obviously you got a lot of press out of there too, but I mean, what was your thinking on being so much more conservative?
We had one goal in this crisis: keep everyone healthy, safe, and alive. That was our goal. And I would often have in community forums talk to, we'd have empathy, it'd have to be good listeners, and we had no good answers. We would tell business owners, local business those suffering economically, our restrictions aren't causing the harm. It's the pandemic. If we cannot have a healthy society and a healthy recovery, we cannot have a sustainable economy that recovers as well. Our thinking all along was to follow the science, follow the data, be diligent, thorough, and consistent, be ethical with our community, what we know, what we don't know, and what we're basing our decisions on. What we've seen, which is frustrating, I can tell you, and leading regional and statewide coalitions with leaders like Kim Driscoll from Salem, is we were never really kept informed. We were left on our own in Massachusetts. Massachusetts at one point had the third highest COVID death rate in the nation. It may be 6 or 7 now, still top 10, Doug. Why? With all our wealth and resources and hospital systems and healthcare. And that's because we had at the time, if you remember, this guy in the White House who didn't just contradict, completely undercut efforts to keep our society healthy, safe, and alive. The United States should have been the leader on this. How many hundreds of thousands of people died? Most could have been avoided. And Massachusetts has the same. And it wasn't the same message, but the message can't be 351 cities and towns. Here's some guidance. Do what you think is best. The same for 400 school districts, especially in a densely populated region like the Metro Boston region, where our borders are not impermeable. I mean, people move around, and we saw in those regions, especially where the people who have the worst projected outcomes, vulnerable populations, black, brown, poor, immigrant, they were getting sicker at higher rates than people like myself, dying at higher rates. And so our guidance has always been keep everyone safe. And yes, that sometimes meant that, to the frustration of others, that there were businesses in a city or town open and they weren't here, but at the end of the day, that's not what was causing damage to our economy. And I sleep well at night that we did that. And it wasn't about being conservative. We were just following the science and the data. And at a time of crisis, we need bold, deliberate leadership at every level. We cannot have uncertainty.
Does anybody have a question? Anyone in the community members have a question about city's response to COVID at all? If not, sure.
I don't have a question, but I have a statement, and that was the early response and the access to testing.
They're bringing a microphone over so you can hear it. We're recording this stuff.
Okay. The early response, the access to testing, was unique. We had a situation where we had a summer home in Maine, and we were only able to go there because we could get tests without any barriers, and we were able to go and sort of isolate by ourselves up there for a while. But I didn't have anybody else saying, oh, I can get a test like that. Nobody knows. So, I've been critical of this guy from time to time. But in this particular case, I think right up and down the line, he has done an excellent job.
So you really appreciate that conservative approach. That paid some serious dividends, definitely. Okay, let's move on a little bit here. Mr. Mayor, your administration took on a lot of big issues over the year, including climate change plan, greatly expanding affordable housing, spurring significant job and revenue growth through commercial development, bringing new T-stops and investing in a bike and pedestrian infrastructure, and many more things. What issue posed the greatest challenge to you, and what are you most proud of just taking on?
It's a hard question to answer because there were technical challenges in many of those things. Certainly, like you mentioned, the Green Line extension, Mike and others were advocating along with the community for decades before I was mayor, and many people have passed on. But since then, the greatest, in all those cases, the greatest challenge, I'd say, in those cases may have been bureaucracy at a state or national level, where you don't have folks who really have a lens to understand what it takes to lead or be part of a municipal culture or organization or government, or what happens at the grassroots level. When people die or lose their apartment because of the pandemic, or their business is failing, or they have other issues going on, we're the ones who get those calls day in, day out. Whether you're a mayor or a city manager or a town administrator, we're up close. So we usually know many of those people and those families and people that are affected. So that lack of perspective at other levels of bureaucracy, it can be frustrating, because the things that Somerville gets accolades for, as myself, and let me be clear, whatever we succeed in, whatever we do, is the product of many hands. Those in elected and transactional authority, those who work for a city agency or department, those who are advocates and activists. Never underestimate that power, because I've used it all the time. If I had to climb a ladder for Somerville, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. There were 81,000 people with me on the ladder. It's like kind of being on the Red Sox. When you're good, they let you know. When you're in a slump, man, they give you a good kick in the backside and push you up that ladder even farther, and it was great. And so I had that incredible energy to fuel us every day. I am proud about how the community is relentless, tenacious, fueled by its values to make this place an exceptional place to live, work, play, raise a family, grow old, and for everyone to chase its dreams. And we've shown that you can, as a community, an organization that extends beyond the brick and mortar of City Hall into the neighborhoods, that the importance of having effective, accountable public administration, long-term plans and strategic vision based on deliberate and collaborative democracy and community values, and that works. It works because we tie it to the social impact on people's lives here. That's what I'm proud of most, and the greatest challenge is opening up everyone's eyes and widening their lens. So this is what government's supposed to do. We don't just play a role, we have a critical role to play to support that value set and lead with it every day.
I can see why you've been in that chair for nearly 20 years. Okay, what do you think will be the biggest issue or challenge for the next governor, or excuse me, mayor?
I can tell the next governor
Freudian
too,
slip there, you know.
We'll stick with mayor right now. Well, I'm excited. We have two great candidates, finalists. We had three good ones before that. Whoever the next mayor is, she or he, I'm excited to, my commitment to the city, my responsibilities to make sure I share my experience and my administration's poised to provide them with the context, not just binders of information, to make sure that the city, the organization, the councils, the school committee, and the departments are ready to move forward and exceed beyond our expectations of success today. There's a few challenges. One, when we come into these roles, it was the same for me. We have no idea really what we're doing. How do you perceive the job? We're in a position of transactional authority because we're voting into it. I'd submit to everyone, and I've told this to the candidates and remind everyone, our job is not to manage the city. Our job is not to be the chief analyst. Make no mistake, I'm very aware of and learned about sound fiscal policy and the power of analytics and data. Our job is to lead. And lead means we see our role as a facilitator, as an ambassador in high charge of the city's values, as a good listener that has empathy, that can lead hard and want to move fast to do things. The community understand when to absorb, even whether it's merit-based enough, criticism, anger, passion, frustration that we're moving too slow, too fast, not doing anything, and continue to engage in that environment and survive, and to build a team. I've been so proud and privileged to be a student of this community in the organization. It's, after 18 years, I was figuring it out. As I say, you're always a student, and you can see yourself as a learner here, and you can, as I say, if I had to describe my two characteristics I'm proud of, which is really the city, the neighborhoods I grew up in, and the people, most of the people who I've interviewed who are here tonight who still work for the city, I've asked them two things. Do you have a passion for curiosity and a willingness to be abnormal? And if we can unlock those two things, and we can empower one another, not just those in the organization, you need to be bold, to think hard and long, to lead with those values, we eventually succeed. There's no failure. And that's happened in Somerville. That's the city as a whole. That's the activism and advocacy leading into our administration, our operations, and where we want to go. So some of the things the litany of things you mentioned, that comes out of that approach as a city. That's what I learned from the community along the way. And if we take the next mayor, she or he understands that you're always a student and you approach it that way, and you use, in Somerville, I would tell you, the rhetorical power of this office to lead not just Somerville, the region. People will follow. It's one of the reasons, Somerville was voted by its peer cities and some of the largest cities in the United States as one of the top 15 most influential cities and organizations for a reason, because we lead on that ladder with the community on those values.
Wow. Okay, last year there was a national conversation about the longstanding issues of racial and social justice. What had Somerville already done about this, and how has the city responded since then, and what do you think needs to happen going forward in your view? We have talked about this, and actually I was honored to be on a panel that you facilitated many months ago, so let me go back to the murder of George Floyd, which we saw recorded on TV, a public lynching. So many others at that time. Ahmaud Marbury, so many more. And the countless we haven't heard about. And following those series of recent horrific killings, mostly at the hands of those who were sworn to protect us, I called anyone I grew up with, worked with, went to school, who was black, brown, at the short end of the system, immigrant, and I apologized to them, most of my black friends. And as many as I had numbers still in my Rolodex on my phone, I said, I'm sorry. The common response from them was, I don't know what you're talking about. You've always gotten it. You even hung a Black Lives Matter banner on City Hall. And my response to them, that's not enough. We gotta do more than that. People like myself who are white, privileged, in a position of authority and power, whose hand the system is, I said to them, we need to do better by you. So what we've done has been better listeners. One, not co-opted the narrative of those whose perspective is closest to that pain that we can never understand, recognized it, and recommitted ourselves to engage in the work. Now, we've done some technical things. We've established the Office of Racial and Social Justice as part of the Executive Office to guide how we engage, support, amplify those voices, not just to see to amplify them as part of that work, and recognize the work is ongoing. We are quick, and we all want, people like me want to do the right thing and pat ourselves on the back. There's a lot more work to be done. Again, the pandemic shone us glaring light on the inequalities of the whole system, more so than ever, in that horrific
murder unfolding. I remember, if those were old enough to remember civil rights, it wasn't until what you saw in Birmingham and in the South with the dogs and the hoses that people's consciousness was shocked. White people mostly, people in position of authority. We should have been, if we have a sense of shame, been disgusted and ashamed what we saw. And for me, it was like, oh, I haven't done nearly enough. So I recommitted myself to ask, what does it mean to be an anti-racist? What does it mean to be a white ally in a position that I have now, and even move forward? What does that work entail, and how do I support the work?
I remember that Black Lives Matter sign outside City Hall. That was quite the story. You've been known to encourage City Hall staff, and you mentioned this word earlier, to be quote unquote abnormal. Have you brought that? How have you brought that approach to your role as mayor, and what do you hope to see in the next mayor? And what does it mean, abnormal?
People may say out of the box. You know, if you want to not just achieve, you want to excel. And we owned a certain, Mike, we were just talking about Somerville's reputation in the late 60s and early 70s. And there was a word that rhymed with Somerville that the Brandon experts say, never repeat it again. But I say you own that reputation, but we wanted to be the best in everything we did, you know, and the values we carried with us and the work that we did. And to be that civil society that upheld the tenets of American ideals of being inclusive and tolerant and compassionate, but also to set a standard about how its municipal government should represent those values and act in the way that makes everybody proud, that puts to death that word years ago and says, you know, Somerville really leads that standard. And a small city that couldn't get out of its own way, that's missed every opportunity to achieve, that has had every brunt of every joke for generations, can actually show that leading with progressive values, with a social conscience, and sound public administration, and long-term, they're not mutually exclusive, they're inextricably tied. So I charge everyone, I think those who remember, I've said, do you have a passion for curiosity? Just don't do it the same way all the time. If we want to be a learning organization, we have to evolve, and we have to take risk, be abnormal. And my work was to support the administration, the organization, the staff, to be abnormal. And there's a funny saying, if you want to try something bold and crazy, any advocacy group or a member of the organization just to tell me, no one's ever done it before, and Somerville will be the first. But to support that, is that work based on our values? Is it based by data and logic? Here's what we hope to achieve, and we're not going to feel. And that's hard to do, to say we're a learning organization. It's okay if we make a mistake, because people want to say, well, who's responsible for that? Who are we going to fire? Who are we going to shame? And who are we going to hang an effigy outside of City Hall? And I submit the reason we had that leeway to do that is we led with the community values. We engaged in forums like this, the Resident meetings. We'd support our decision-making and policies with data, and we would charge the public to test our assumptions to be probative, because our approach is that abnormality is an extension of community. So wasn't that curiosity. And I think if you queried in the staff, I'm sure they would tell you, to support that work, it's okay to take risks. We want you to take risks as long as these are our guidelines, and tell the public, here's what we sought to achieve. Now, we didn't get there, but here's what we're learning, how we're going to succeed. Or we met our expectations, so we're going to see if we can increase that result by positive 10%. Or we've exceeded our expectations, we're going to double down on it, here's why. And we've got that support because we've built up that credibility and with transparency and leading with those values and based on data.
Data. Yeah, speaking of data, while taking on big issues, you've remained focused on the nuts and bolts of how to run a city. How have you used data and innovation to improve services for residents? I know Harvard has even done a big survey, a study on you and your use of data.
Yeah, and everything. There wasn't an idea we didn't steal and call our own, to be quite honest, and try to make it better. And we wanted to emulate and replicate the best practices of the public-private sector and develop our own. And one was, when I campaigned back in 2003, we wanted to take the city stat model, which was then in Baltimore by then Mayor Martin O'Malley, who became governor of Maryland, eventually ran for president. And we developed SummerStat. And we took this approach of utilizing, and we embraced the fact that it can't be too redundant. Any conduit of data, whether it's budgetary, whether it's personnel, whether it's surveying the community on their happiness, or their satisfaction, anything to determine how we're doing. Is our investment in a program how we clean your streets, or on crime, or on public health, or how you seek information, or public events, or capital projects, is that working? And to be transparent to the public. We are seeing we're achieving. Here's our outcomes. It's just the way you're seeing it. We shared that in Resistat meeting. So every aspect of our operations, we've utilized data to improve, to measure. We've involved how we stat, as we say. And it's important because we've shown, and one of the things we did was be the first city in the world to measure our happiness as a community. Not a popularity survey, but we wanted to show what we can anecdotally assume that there's a correlation between your subjective happiness and your city's performance every day, because we want to know when you come home or leave your home every day from Somerville, wherever you go, do you feel a sense of belonging to your neighborhood? You know, that societal, that strong fabric and social fabric is important for one's health, happiness, and productivity. And also, it helped us also make the case that we found that people want to be in Somerville because of its civic events, its cultural events, or because we invested in parks. So there's no form of data that didn't give us some guidance, and that has been embedded from day one. And I think we stat 98% of our city's budget. It's also that approach, going back to the pandemic, put us in a unique position more so than just about anyone else in the country. Before the COVID officially hit, we already mobilized and engaged international experts and established our incident command system. That curiosity and willingness to be abnormal and to get outside their comfort zone and utilize data, we have people from every department. You might have been in the arts department working on COVID response in some other division. You might have been in capital projects working on food security and so forth, because people had that mindset and that lens. And when we explained to the public what we knew and didn't know what we were doing, we backed it up with data. So from the very beginning, city's operations, programming, opportunities, and policy development were based on basic data at our fingertips. But always the question, why and how? How can we achieve?
Okay. Well, serving as mayor during the Trump administration, you were an outspoken critic of the former president's rhetoric regarding immigrants. In your view, why are immigration policy and immigrant services important at the municipal level, in your view?
Sure. Maybe I should reflect back on that question. What's been the hardest fight? This is one of them. I think for anyone at the municipal level who, in any community who truly believes in ideals of being a diverse, welcoming, tolerant, compassionate civil society, look, Somerville has been a community of hope and a welcome community for my family. My parents immigrated to Cambridge and escaped to Somerville for a better life, as I say, and I grew up here. My neighborhood streets are all first-generation kids, and we spoke another language. In those days, it was more than likely Italian, Portuguese, possibly from San Miguel and the Azores, or Greek and Irish descent. And now we speak 52 languages from every walks of life in our neighborhoods and our schools, more than 52. And we know the saying, it's true. Our immigrants built this country, built this community on their backs. We weren't the first ones here. And we're fighting for our neighbors, for the people we work for the families whose kids go to school, my kids, who are our neighborhoods, who are our local economy, who love this community and Commonwealth and country as much as you and I and anyone else. So and something my mother said to me, why should anyone have it even as hard as I did to come to this country? To have someone come into office, which we knew he was going to be, worse than we could have expected, didn't expect really much better, to put forth this false nationalistic message of Make America Great, which is founded on white supremacy and keeping immigrants out. I tell many of my immigrant friends who voted for him, that was based on keeping you and your family out, because it'd be better without us, as well as kicking African Americans out of the country. And leveraging and double down on people's fears and ignorance and blaming someone, immigrants, who people can't defend themselves, who are just here, working hard, making our community safe, prosperous, enriching our lives. And for me, I don't know anyone in Somerville who didn't pluck a value string to say, hell no. There are families, there are friends that without them, at some point I really said, I wish every immigrant who was undocumented told everyone go to hell and walked out and see what happened to our economy, to our lives, how much we need them. So those mean-spirited, cruel, just horrific targeting of our most vulnerable, for me, it just got my blood boiling, and it was an easy fight sticking with your friends, I thought.
Well, you're moving on now. After you leave office, you'll be starting a new job as president of the Northeast Clean Energy Council. What exactly is the Northeast Clean Energy Council, and what will you be doing in your new role?
Well, I won't be called mayor, but my mother will get a wish. She'll be able to call me Mr. President, just of that council. So,
Step up there.
So I actually really didn't know much about them, and it is an organization that was the New England Clean Energy Council, is now the leading voice of the clean energy and renewable industry for the Northeast. And what I've been asked this question: what brought you there? And I really didn't consider many things. I had no plan when I made my announcement, but as they engaged me, I was describing this to you. I read their mission statement, sort of embedded, if you look at their website, in their decade of action. And they spoke of certain values we've touched upon here, recognizing how the climate crisis intersects with every part of our lives: our health, our housing needs, our transportation, our economy, our education, and how it intersects with all the major causes that we should all be standing up fighting for today: a fight for racial and social justice, transit mobility equity, public health equity, upward mobility economy for those who've been most negatively and greatly impacted by the climate crisis. Poor people, immigrant communities like my family. I grew up next to, I have that Somerville cough. I grew up next door 50 yards from McGrath Highway. Black, brown people who've endured all the poor policy, planning, transportation failures, public health failures. And it's that intersectionality which reminded me of the work here. And not to go to an organization to just represent industry and answer their complaints, but understanding the opportunity, the urgency of expanding a climate solutions industry, not beyond clean energy renewables, and the work on these important work on these legacy issues. And in doing so, I told them, I'm not going to change who I am. We either can just be responsive to members who want to deal with this policy this way, or we're going to lead and speak up and speak for these other causes. And it's that commitment that really led me there. So it is the leading voice for clean energy today and renewable industry in the Northeast region, which right now is New England, New York State, which will be from Augusta, Maine to DC in the very near future, which is one of the reasons I'm going there, and on climate solutions and working with all allies and stakeholders, aligning them to one mission around all these causes.
I've heard you speak about growing up here in Somerville, and the air pollution and things that you notice. That seems to have shaped your outlook on the whole climate change issue.
Yeah, I'm a student of this community. I mentioned, I said, you never stop being a student. So the many stories that when some people in this room have been fighting for the Green Line or an increase on the climate side, investing in creating a world-class biking and walking infrastructure, or for public health, or for better parks, leading with equity. Those are reflect back, that's what people, when I was growing up, were fighting for. Many of them were ignored. And I have somewhat of understanding of those issues, having suffered some health, nothing critical major, but respiratory illness and seeing families work through some difficult conditions and see a city fail to lead on that. So I carry that with me as a student of this community into this, and it's part of our value set, right? And I hope to bring really what is missing in the conversation, the work, is a city and city regional alignment to the work to take on the climate crisis. Because if you look around the world on climate and so many other issues, on housing, on public health, transportation, it has been city and city regional leaders that have shown the boldest, more deliberate, in the advocacy and activism that exists in those regions, which is the few that have shown the boldest, the most deliberate leadership on that. And that is important. And there's a saying from the book, I think it's Metropolitan Revolution: as cities lead, nations follow. So there's our opportunity, one of the reasons I'm sure I was engaged in it, and one of the reasons I want to go there.
Okay. Well, we've just heard from the mayor on a number of topics. Lastly, about how he's going to be focusing on clean energy and climate change in his new role. Now, here's where I'd like a little audience participation, if I could get it. Anyone have a question for the mayor about climate change, energy sustainability, where we're going in Somerville, anywhere anything at all? Any question or comment? If not,
On the back there.
one in the back? Okay. All right.
Hi, my name is Jack. I'm also a lifelong Somerville resident. SHS class of 92.
92?
92.
Oh, younger than me.
That is. My claim to fame is I did coach your son at the Somerville Rec program. I'd like to thank you, first and foremost, for the improvements you made to the quality of life over the past 18 years. I've lived it, and it's true. Thank you for that. But the question that comes up at the coffee shops, the barber shops, and the courts is why not? In the midst of what we can consider, I'd say the greatest population boom, development boom in the city. I think we're about 81,000 back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. We're about 100K, and that was due to development. So I'm seeing that the population is going to increase. The city is in that phase where it's about to boom, and it just seems like why not one more term to see it through?
Well, thank you. It's actually a question I get often, and I wasn't kidding. I told my wife I'd be actually 60 at maximum. I've loved it, and I don't want to go. And I'm not tired of the job. I could do the job another 20 years. I don't think I should, or anyone should. And I don't think I said this at the beginning. When I looked, and I probably would have came to this decision but for COVID last fall, around this time. And I had, in those moments where we all had isolation, a moment to reflect on some things. I said, I got this next year ahead. I mean, and you never know, but as you get later on in your career, you wonder, you want to be all in. Am I going to be it again? And I was all in the job, and I thought, well, there's a municipal election. I wasn't worried about that, not to take it for granted, but I go and work hard. I knock doors, no matter who's running, because I think people should hear us make the case why we want to do this job, and that takes a toll out of you. And I had a good sense, having been a year, almost a year, or several months into COVID, what it took out of myself and the staff and the organization, and the amount of energy I would have to put forth to make sure we continue to come out of it with our health as much intact as possible, recapturing the economic momentum we had. I also thought about, well, the promises I made to everyone in this job, what could I make sure we got done and launched? I said, asked myself two questions. Okay, at the end of the calendar year, would I be standing up still? And would I become that person who said, why did I do this again? And while I loved it still, I just said, you know what? I think the city's best served if I put all my attention to COVID. And trust me, I'd have to give up a lot of time on COVID, and I couldn't do that. And a bunch of other things. It was just the right time. I think the ethical time for me to say to my bosses, you should find another mayor right now, but I promise you this, and I appreciate that. I'm flattered by it. City's in great shape. That doesn't mean we don't have challenges, but I'm always confident in all of us, all of you. We have all the tools we need to continue to be abnormal, if you dare to be curious, and do those things. I swore to folks, I said, I'm gonna make you proud about how we transitioned on the way out for January 10th, that everything can be done before. And I mean that. And I'm not going away, I just won't be the mayor, I'll be Joe. And you have still a talented, incredibly talented group of people working for the city. And you have all of you. Anything we've done has been the product of many hands. So there wasn't any one reason. I just never wanted to be the person sitting at my desk saying, why did I do this again? Well, I loved it. It wasn't being about top. It was just being in the right at a moment. And it wasn't because of COVID. But again, I'm not going to tell you it didn't exhaust me. It did. I would have probably came to the decision. And in some ways, I wish I could have made a decision early and gave more people opportunity to think about it. But we have some good candidates running. But thank you for that. Appreciate it. SHS, I hope you've seen the new high school. We're going to do a ribbon cut on that.
Any other climate questions before I move on? There's one right there in the back.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me through this mask. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Larry Yu. I'm active with the Climate Coalition Somerville. I also sit on the Commission on Energy.
Thank you for your service, yeah.
Well, I will save my advocacy on say, geothermal micro districts till later. But I'm actually curious. I understand you're heading to Glasgow for COP26, and I'm curious, I guess, what you're hoping to gain out of that, and what you're hoping is achieved at COP26.
Yes, by the way, I'm going on vacation time, not city time, so we got my new job, but I'm going to be working while I'm there, even though I'm working on behalf of that organization. It's really Larry, what you and everyone advocating what we did with and implementing Somerville Climate Forward and moving on those things. I'm going to bring that city perspective. So I'll be out in COP26, which is the UN Conference on Climate Change. I'll be, I think my term, I have official observer status, so we'll be observing, a lot of the negotiations between nations, but also engage with other leaders from here from the Commonwealth, industries from the Northeast, major academic institutions that had institutes forward in climate initiatives, including UMass, but again from Augusta down to DC. Also meeting with members of the Biden administration. We're working out those details. And really setting, as I work, I'll be speaking on panels on issues like talking about Somerville and what we've done on our approach to decarbonizing transportation and bringing that city perspective, and also sharing my experience from other local leaders about, hey, after we sign up for a C40 and race to zero and all these pledges, what next? Because the barrier, we're not even close to what we need to do as a society. We need practical implementation guidelines and assistance from municipalities at the city and regional level to make sure that we have an environment and a marketplace that helps make the clean, green, equitable choice for transportation, for energy, for how we live, the easy choice. And that'll be part of the conversation. That's really then strategically for the organization to set the dialogue on how the NEC-EC, where I'm at, is going to move and grow with our federal partners and state partners across all the New England states, New York, and eventually down to DC, if that makes sense. So it's the beginning of that dialogue and work. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it and happy to talk about it when we get back.
Okay. Anything? Well, there's another one on climate right over there. Climate, energy. They all seem to be tied up into the same.
A new member of the administration.
Yes.
You have to, and there's been 100 people I think hired since COVID. I've met 20 of them, but thanks. It's good to meet you tonight. Thanks for joining the team in the city.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very recently joining the Housing Commission as of a couple weeks ago. But my question is, you're talking a little bit about how Somerville has been so much at the forefront of progress, in terms of our response to COVID, in terms of I used to work at Project Soup, and so just all the assistance that was given to us as a food pantry able to run our services, and immigrant services, and all the services that are available to those who are housing insecure. And my question is, how can we as municipal employees and as a city and as community members, how can we spread the success that we've had? In looking at, we have lots of neighbor communities that are dealing with the same issues, that are dealing with issues around policing and dealing with issues around housing insecurity, food insecurity. How can we share what we've done well and continue to grow on that success?
Well,
Oh, and I live here as well.
yeah. You gotta tell everybody your name.
My name's Ben.
Thanks for joining the Sarah for Ben, a new member. Thank you for working for the City of Somerville. But hey, it's a great question. But let me tell you, so I've testified at a couple of hearings over the last week. One for municipal options to adopt a real estate transfer fee to fuel our need to preserve, not just build housing, but preserve the housing opportunities for renters and buyers in our neighborhoods, or for tenants' right of first refusal to buy at fair market value, or on the many other things we've talked about. And the only reason, and Ellen's in the back, the only reason that those issues have momentum, now whether they pass this session or no, but because they're maturing, is, I see my role as the ambassador, hard charge, but it is the advocacy and coalition work, whether it's on that, what people have done in the bike ped community to increase those clean, equitable mobility options, or for clean, dedicated bus lanes, or the Green Line extension, or on housing, or public health, or immigrants' rights. It has been coalition of city leaders, not necessarily, mostly not elected. Leadership isn't because you just have transactional authority. You're a leader if you work in the city, a leader if you're just someone who gives a damn about the community and the values we all hold up as our own in the region, in that I can't even give it enough justice, underestimate the power of that activism and advocacy, how it assists leaders myself. And I chair the Metropolitan Mayors Coalition, which are the 15 cities in the urban core of Boston, as far south as Braintree, and worked closely with, when I was head of mass management the last year, over COVID, with other coalitions around the Commonwealth. And I will tell you how much that proactive, engaged activism, and Alan Schechter, who heads the Office of Housing Stability, he will tell you that supports, drives us up the ladder, it makes that ladder sturdy for us. So it makes, that's what you need to do. We need to tell those stories. You need to engage your counterparts. Don't rely on the mayor or the city manager. Our job's gonna be easy on that part. It's getting people off the back of their chair, on the edge, pluck a value stream with them and say they own this work. Here's what's at stake. Here's what we can achieve, and here's what we're gonna feel. If it's on housing, well, we're gonna lose the very soul of people who want to be part of the community that makes Somerville great. And we're gonna isolate poverty more remotely and more intensely as a region if, one, we don't stop messing around the margin, have delivered bold, proven methods to not just provide genuine, authentic opportunities to own or rent a home in Somerville, start a business, but also builds our economy, why people are investing here. And a transportation system that is green, that is clean, that is equitable and easy and reliable to use, that services the whole region. And these are value arguments, and too many people are still sitting back. But the only reason many of these issues come up to where they are, trust me, it's not because of me. That's what you all do. That's what Somerville does. And many other activists and advocates from municipalities nearby. In most cases, if you take Massachusetts, the region, as quirky and as people love our unique parochialism of so many cities and towns, on the policy front, crushing us. Because when you get outside of some cities that have some capacity, organization to plan, to think, it's usually one person, even when you have a strong mayor or administrator who get it, but don't have the ability to do it on their own. So that is critical to getting the work done. So keep doing what you're doing and speak up, because I hope, in those who work in administration with me, I hope they've informed you. We support that. Be outspoken about what we need to do. And I've always hoped I've provided an environment for people to come in and say, hey, you need to do more. We need you out there leading this, and we need X, Y, Z to move this, to not just move the needle, but to drive and lead the region. Somerville, top 15 most influential in the country, major reason behind it. No. Thanks for joining.
Okay, well, you know, the mayor's been talking about what he considers to be the biggest challenge for the next mayor coming in, the challenges facing the city. And we know that he and his team are working on trying to have a smooth transition to the next person who sits in as the mayor. Now, here's a question for the audience that you can, if you have a question for the mayor about this. What issues or efforts would you ask Mayor Curtatone to emphasize most when he gets his 5-10 minutes with the next mayor?
It's more than 10.
What things would you like him to emphasize most during these transition efforts? In other words, what would you like to see the outgoing mayor to tell the incoming mayor about? Something that would emphasize. There's someone in the way back there.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Jessica Eshelman. I'm with Union Square Main Streets, and I'm a proud Somerville resident. Mayor Curtatone, your administration has done so much to advance transportation equity, but also in a way that is helping us do transit-oriented development. We all know how critical this is for our tax base to continue being the city that we want to be. How would you, or please would you, urge the next mayor that we have to prioritize our locally, independently owned businesses in order to keep Somerville the space that we all love and the place that keeps all of these eyes looking our way and investing in our community?
Thanks, Jessica. Good to see you. For those who know, Jessica is the Executive Director of Union Square Main Streets, an incredible organization as we have East Somerville Main Streets. I feel confident that both of the final candidates understand that. How do we act more deliberately to make sure we are given, much like we have a crisis in housing and giving people a genuine, authentic opportunity to rent or buy a home, we have to make sure people can chase their dreams on New Main Street, as we say. And all the growth of the city, all the plans, and summer vision and the neighborhood plans, that's the product of a community's vision. But we have to do we have an opportunity here, especially with ARPA money, beyond the money, because we're Somerville, to establish the framework of creating community wealth. Now, I'm a capitalist, to be honest with you. I just recognize that only a few people capitalize on capitalism, and I'm not one of them. But, you know, community capitalism that is shared, we need to, the reason that investment is coming to Somerville, yeah, it's the zoning and investment infrastructure, it's our DNA, our creativity, our cultural diversity, our connectivity, our sort of freakishness, as like I say, and artisticness, and people want that. If we lose that, not just the people who live here, obviously, but the businesses, small businesses, I'm always proud that we have probably the largest collection of independently or locally owned operators and owners of small business. We are in threat of losing that. We have to, in creating community wealth, and I'm explaining one of the things we're going to do that, is make sure that you can conceive your ideas, you can develop those ideas, and you can chase those dreams, and you need to be part of that new Main Street. That has value. As an economic return to those with those big companies want to come in, the employees want to be here. So one of the things we were launching, and I mentioned it when I gave my very late midterm, because of COVID and my announcement I wasn't running, was the ARC, Advance and Reinvestment in Community. And we are beginning a process with the Democracy Collaborative, where we want to establish a framework to create community wealth, keeping money here, which expands our economic development plans. And think of it as this. We know, because of all the work we've done as a community to invest in planning and zoning and invest in infrastructure, and all the investments coming in, unprecedented. We're not surprised that we're seeing an expansion of life sciences and biotech, and we're all in that we think climate solutions, since we have the largest climate solutions incubator in North America, Greentown Labs here, we are excited about the pace. But if we don't connect that new growth to the human lives, the people, into people, place, and planet, then we're not doing our job. And then it's fair game for someone to say to me, why am I going to fight for the Green Line and for all this development if I'm not going to be here for it? If I can't keep my business here, if my kids can't go to the schools that we fought to build, that is a fair comment. So we want to make sure that a significant portion of that new growth money come to the city goes into creating community wealth and civic institutions to support that are here, and launch new ones that perhaps make daycare more affordable for those who need it, make public transportation free, as we're already doing that in our schools. Subsidizing new businesses, taking like models like Nibble Kitchen with Main Street, make sure you get to be part of new Main Street. Maybe it's send your son or daughter, if they graduate from Somerville High School, for free to community college. We actually have the ability to do that. We can actually leverage some of that ARPA money on top of what we have. We don't have all the money. We are so much better off today because of our community work. But if we don't, and there is a tie, we got to always make the case, tie that to human, local, social impact. We are missing an opportunity, and eventually, not only are we going to push out the very fabric of our community, we're going to lose on the economic level. People aren't going to want to invest here down the road.
I've covered the mayor a long time. He's been way out ahead on so many different things, and leading the pack. And he's gotten many awards and a lot of recognition about so many different things. Is there anything that any of the community members, either here or virtually, anything that you would ask the mayor to, the next mayor, to continue that this mayor has started? Anything at all? Okay, right here.
I need the microphone, sorry.
Yes, wait for the microphone.
Hi, my name is Ron Newman. I would like to make sure that your successor continues and expands on the arts support and programming that the city is known for. And I'd also like to add a cautionary note, which is that we're in danger of losing parts of that community. We had the Artisans Asylum recently pick up and move to Alston. We had the Central Street building closed down across the street from the museum. And we have a large group of artists who are basically here because of the benevolence of the Rogers Phone Corporation, which may not be here forever. So I think the next mayor needs to pay attention to how to keep the creative and artistic community here that has been developing for the last 3 decades.
Thanks, Ron. I couldn't agree more. And even at the deepest abyss of the Great Recession, 2008, 2010, what kept us stable was that creative economy, that the artists, the artisans, the fabricators, the makers, and all that advocacy and work. You know, as a community, we put that into the zoning and make sure we preserve those spaces. But in thinking about how to create community wealth, it's supporting that work, that very part of our DNA. And as I finished what I was saying on Jessica's question and comment, the next administration, we're going to make sure we're launching the ARC work now, and that framework is there for all of you to own as well. That being said, because of the position we were in, everyone's advocacy, we were able to do a couple things. We did take the Armory as it was going to be lost. Even though we didn't own it, it was always seen as a civic institution, and gave it back really to the community. And the people here, Tom Galligani and others, are working to make sure that that will be for the arts community. And we have other assets here. We're working to make sure that we have places for people to innovate in the arts, in many forms of arts and creativity, and continue to be part of the community economy. Somerville, at one point, I think it still has second per capita only for artists only to Manhattan. That's paid off. We take that for granted. So we need to make sure we support them. We have the opera money here now. We can leverage that. We have plenty of revenues coming in, and we think about creating that community wealth. It's creating opportunity as well. And we cannot lose the artists, much like we can't lose anyone that really is embodied as part of our DNA. Couldn't agree more. And that'll be part of our transition and work in new administration. But I'm confident because, again, I have confidence in either person who's elected mayor and embracing that value, but I have more confidence in everyone here and the community. You won't let that slide backwards.
Okay, so I'd like to open it up to any other questions at all. Any questions or comments here or virtually you want to ask the mayor. And you can think about it for a couple of minutes, because I'm going to throw one more thing. I got to ask you, while you're thinking about your question, I got to ask you, what are your thoughts about what's going on in Washington with these infrastructure and social spending bill, all the things that would affect local communities? You had this big package, and it's been shrinking day by day. But just the idea of what they're trying to do. I mean, Joe Biden's talking about trying to do this on an FDR scale or an LBJ scale. As a mayor, what are your thoughts about all of that?
I will tell you, and for the most part, mayors, no matter what party you lie on, strong supporters of being bold and deliberate and having that impact at the local level. And I hope they get it all. I understand we may not get that all now. I mean, you might think paid family leave is not a local issue. Of course it is. You know, it impacts working families here in their life and a child's ability and someone's ability to support their children's ability to achieve and learn and grow healthy. But I admire what the president's trying to do. And if we don't get everything, which we probably won't, then to continue to understand we got to continue that advocacy and that work. And I will tell you, and that's we talk about challenge. I went back to what I said earlier. It's usually people at the state or federal level have no concept about the impacts of that work locally. We see it every day, all of us. The ARPA money that came to us, if you were on the meeting last night, is unprecedented. I can't recall, I've been in local office now, only elected office I had, being an alderman, not council, and mayor 26 years. The years, more than 2 decades advocating that we want money directly to municipalities, and it happened here. And ARPA, we have about $77 million that we cannot squander, so we need to do it right, which is why our public engagement and focus on those systemic failures and seeding opportunities to close those gaps and launch new, again, creating that community wealth and healing. So my thought is I would love to see that whole package. I don't think it's going to happen, but we need to not compromise our values. We need to continue that fight, but it has an impact locally. It will still, but I can see share people's frustrations when you don't have paid.
I was going to say, how frustrating is it to see it shrink
Yeah,
day by day where it started? And
it is, and again, when your leadership is one about having empathy and even accepting with grace that which frustrates you and is just illogical, and continue at it. You got to survive it. Leadership, you got to survive it. That means you're an advocate, you're an activist, you survive it, you go out of it again. We got to continue to pluck a value string, and even those on the other side. Look what we did in our part, what they did in our part. I never thought that would have happened. So, no struggle's easy.
That's the truth. Before we wrap it up here, does anyone have any thoughts on any questions for the mayor? We've got one right here. Virtually as well, send those virtual questions in. We'll get a couple of those in before we wrap things up.
Mayor Curtatone, as you were answering the questions earlier on about Somerville and New Year's as mayor, it felt like after every answer you gave, we should all be applauding. And so when I think about the way that you took a conservative approach during the early days of the pandemic, that revealed a real caring about people of Somerville. And I think about the goal you have set of climate neutrality for Somerville by 2050, the forward-looking, direction-setting leadership that you've given us was very apparent. And the humanity revealed in your approach to being what kind of city can I say? Not cooperating with ICE and protecting our immigrant neighbors. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And so I want you to hear us say that. And so that's what I have to say.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you. And
I believe were you the first mayor to declare in Massachusetts the racism a public health crisis?
yes, we're the first city that declared it a public health crisis.
Well, I've told you personally that I appreciated that.
No.
And
Thank you.
thank
You shared
very
me
much
your
for that.
stories.
So-
Appreciate it.
So we're going to wrap things up here. If we don't hear anything else from the community members here or virtually, going once, going twice, okay. Well, Mayor, in that case, to wrap things up, I'd just like to have you give your final thoughts to all the great people of Somerville whom you have served for 18 years. What are your thoughts about, as you exit the stage, moving on to something else, moving on to another pretty big stage, but just what would you like to personally say to the people of Somerville?
Well, I probably have a lot more to say, but I thank you all. I am a student in this community, and it taught me a lot. And thanks for pushing me. Thanks for holding me accountable, though some nights I wasn't too thankful for it. But I really, again, I'd say the next administration comes in, whoever a mayor, whoever she or he may be, or councilors, let's support them. Let's give them the flexibility and runway to lead. As long as they're leading with our values and help them succeed, I want to see them surpass anything we've done, because I want to see the community succeed. But I have a lot more to say, but I thank you, and I'm here till January 3rd. I'll still be in the city, I just won't be Mayor Joe, I'll just be plain old Joe. And I thank you for what you've done for Somerville. It's only, everyone drove that. I just happen to be lucky enough to have that front seat. I got a bird's eye view. Stay safe. Appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Okay, that's the mayor, Joe Curtatone.